Despite the F-22 Raptor's reputation as the world's most capable air superiority fighter, the stealth jet has lost a number of notional dogfights to older and less advanced platforms. Few exercises have done more damage to the mighty Raptor's notoriety than a series of dogfights with Germany's Eurofighter Typhoon that took place just about a decade ago. But what really happened between these dogfighting dynamos, and what does it mean for the Raptor's legacy? Let's get to the bottom of this long-standing internet debate. I'm Alex Hollings, and this is Air Power. Back in 2012, German Eurofighter Typhoons defeating some F-22 Raptors in notional dogfights was a really big deal, not just in the global press, but for many of those involved in these drills. In fact, not long after those drills were over, those German Eurofighters were spotted wearing F-22 kill markings, as their pilots told the press that they had just eaten Raptor salad for lunch. And now, with the Air Force's next-generation air dominance fighter cruising towards service in the coming decade, it seems increasingly likely that the Raptor will retire without ever firing a shot at another aircraft in anger, making these simulated combat exercises and a handful of exciting intercepts the extent of the Raptor's air-to-air legacy. So what is that legacy exactly? Is the F-22 truly as dominant as people believe? Or is the Raptor's biggest advantage not stealth, but hype? Now, this story involves a lot of context, and it might take a minute to tell, so I'll give you the bottom line up front. The Raptor really does live up to its reputation, but it isn't invincible. This story begins with German Eurofighter Typhoons participating for the first time in the US Air Force's large-scale Red Flag air combat exercises, which were held over Alaska in 2012. Red Flag is an advanced aerial combat training course that pits a wide variety of aircraft, often from multiple nations, against large-scale and realistic threats meant to simulate a near-peer fight. In their first outing, Germany sent 150 airmen and 8 Eurofighter Typhoons from their 74th Tactical Air Force Wing to participate in a wide variety of missions over 2 weeks. Included among those missions was a series of close-range basic fighter maneuver drills with America's Raptors. Now, for those who don't speak airplane nerd, basic fighter maneuvers, or BFM, is fighter pilot parlance for dogfights. After these exercises were over, Germany's Eurofighter pilots arrived at 2012's Farnborough International Air Show, where they were quick to discuss their victories over the F-22. According to David Cenciati over at The Aviationist, Germany's Typhoon pilots explained that when the F-22 was flying with external fuel tanks attached and fighting within visual range, they were often able to outclass the Raptor. Now, in order to understand why that would be a big deal, we need to understand more about these aircraft. Despite their generational differences, the F-22 Raptor and Eurofighter Typhoon actually have a number of things in common. They were both originally designed to serve as air superiority fighters born out of the Cold War, with the Typhoon first taking to the skies in 1994 and the F-22 following behind in 1997. Likewise, both fighters ultimately entered service in the early to mid-2000s, with the Typhoon entering active duty in 2003 and the Raptor once again following behind in 2005. But despite these aircraft both being designed at around the same time to serve in similar capacities, they differ dramatically in how they go about accomplishing their mission. The F-22 Raptor was always meant to be a revolution in air power, leaning heavily into America's groundbreaking stealth technology to produce what was, and still is, the stealthiest operational fighter on the face of the planet. But it's not just stealth that makes the Raptor a capable platform. It also boasts a high degree of sensor fusion and advanced avionics that allow for an extreme degree of situational awareness, all while reducing the cognitive load on the pilot. In other words, the F-22's onboard computers allow the pilot to devote more attention to the fight and less to operating the aircraft. I'll quote F-22 pilot Randy Gordon from a lecture he gave at MIT that you can find right here on YouTube. When you're flying the Raptor, you're not thinking about flying the Raptor. You're thinking about employing the Raptor. Flying is secondary. But the F-22 isn't all about stealth and sensor fusion. It also incorporates elements of what might be considered fourth-generation dogfighting design, like thrust vector control, which is the ability to orient its jet nozzles independent of the airframe to perform incredibly aerobatic maneuvers. It's also got an impressive thrust-to-weight ratio and an M61A2 20mm Gatling gun that can fire its onboard 480 rounds at a blistering rate of 6,000 rounds per minute. This time, I'll quote British RAF Typhoon pilot and squadron commander Rich Wells. "Raptor has vector thrust. Typhoon doesn't. What the aircraft can do, it's incredible. The Typhoon just doesn't do that." And while the Raptor usually carries a total of 8 weapons internally, 6 AIM-120 AMRAAMs and 2 AIM-9 Sidewinders, it can be fitted with 4 external pylon stations for additional munitions when it's tired of speaking softly and decides to become its own big stick. As a result, the F-22 bridges two combat philosophies, offering such a high degree of stealth and situational awareness that it can win most fights before the opponent even knows it's there, alongside a highly respectable slew of traditional dogfighting traits that allow it to stand and swing with the most dynamic dogfighters of the previous generation. The Eurofighter Typhoon, on the other hand, wasn't aiming to reinvent the existing air superiority model, so much as to perfect it as it was. Its delta-wing design, a shape nearly adopted by the F-22's defunct bomber sibling, offers a high degree of subsonic maneuverability alongside increased lift and range. The design, as well as the materials that make up the Typhoon, all lend it a higher degree of stealth than you might find in a comparably advanced fourth-generation fighter. In fact, I'll quote Eurofighter promotional materials here. "The aircraft is built with advanced composite materials to deliver a low radar profile and strong airframe. Only 15% of the aircraft's surface is metal, delivering stealth operation and protection from radar-based systems." Like many other fighters, including the F-22, the Typhoon also leverages electronic warfare capabilities to obscure its radar return. And unlike the maintenance-heavy Raptor, the Typhoon was designed to be easy to maintain and repair, assembled out of 15 interchangeable modules to minimize downtime. When up close and personal, the Typhoon's Mauser BK 27mm gun fires at either 1,000 or 1,700 rounds per minute, while it only carries about 150 rounds on board. Since entering service back in 2003, the Typhoon has matured into an extremely capable multi-role platform, leaving its air superiority roots behind to become one of the most well-rounded fighters in service today, leveraging its 13 hardpoints for a wide variety of mission sets. This time, I'll quote Air Force General John P. Jumper, who's the former Chief of Staff of the branch, and among the few pilots with seat time in both the Raptor and Typhoon. The Eurofighter is certainly, as far as smoothness of controls and ability to pull and sustain high G-forces, very impressive. That is what it was designed to do, especially the version I flew, with the avionics, the color-moving map displays, etc., all absolutely top-notch. The maneuverability of the airplane in close-in combat was also very impressive. The Typhoon's pair of Eurojet EJ200 afterburning turbofan engines aren't quite as powerful as the Raptor's, propelling the jet to a top speed of Mach 2, vice the Raptor's 2.25. But top speed doesn't mean much in a fight, and the Eurofighter's comparatively lower weight allows for a better thrust-to-weight ratio for the Typhoon in its interceptor configuration when compared to a similarly equipped Raptor. Alright, now that we've got the basics down, let's talk about the fight. A lot of the details remain murky, but there are some things we know about these 2012 exercises. Based on pilot statements, we know that at least some, if not all of them, were one-on-one engagements, and most importantly, they occurred within visual range, with the Raptor carrying external fuel tanks. Now, this distinction is important because it means that the fighting began under what could be called a forced pretense that effectively neutered the Raptor's greatest strengths: its ability to use stealth and situational awareness to dictate how an engagement begins. In real life, F-22 pilots would almost certainly be aware of the Typhoon before the Typhoon was aware of it, allowing the Raptor to put itself into an advantageous position before the fighting began, or maybe even taking the Typhoon out from beyond visual range. Now, this type of exercise is common in military training, and I'll liken it to my MMA days. It could be compared to offensive and defensive positions in wrestling. A neutral start in scholastic wrestling begins with both athletes on their feet. This would be like two fighters flying into an exercise in the same way they might in real life. Starting in a defensive or disadvantaged position, on the other hand, is when one wrestler begins the period on their hands and knees, with their opponent next to them on one knee with one arm over their back. In the case of these specific exercises, the F-22 played the role of the disadvantaged wrestler, starting from its knees, playing to the Eurofighter's strengths rather than its own. But, just like in wrestling, we need to remember that starting in a defensive or disadvantaged position isn't an excuse for losing. It's just part of the game. There were some other allowances made for the Eurofighter before the fighting began, however. While the F-22 was carrying external fuel tanks that, to some extent, compromised both its aerobatic and stealth performance, the Eurofighter Typhoon that participated in the one-on-one dogfights against the Raptor was allowed to fly not only without fuel tanks, but without any external munitions at all. That not only improved the Typhoon's maneuverability, it also just couldn't happen in real life unless the Eurofighter was going to be left with nothing but its guns. This time, I'll quote Germany's Major Mark Gruen, one of the pilots that participated in the drills. "There were 2 mornings where we flew against the Raptor 1v1. We pulled off all the tanks to get the most angle of attack. The Eurofighter really is an animal with no tanks." Now, how many of each fighter participated in these drills, what the rules of engagement were, and what the final kill ratios for each fighter were, are all details that neither nation has disclosed. Though there have been a number of claims made online that I won't share here because I can't verify them. But I will say that all of these claimed numbers do show Raptors winning the majority of their fights with the Typhoons, but they notably do show a number of Typhoon victories as well. Now, one thing that comes up often in well-informed debates about these exercises are that the Eurofighter Typhoons came equipped with both helmet-mounted targeting systems to engage enemy fighters off-bore sight, or without aiming the nose of their aircraft at the bad guy, as well as the Pirate Infrared Search and Track, or IRST system, that's potentially capable of spotting stealth fighters at distances as great as 30 miles out. Now, this would have been a significant advantage over the F-22, which has neither capability to date, but at the time of these dogfight exercises, these systems were still being rolled out to Germany's Air Force, and the Typhoons that participated in these drills did not have them. According to the German pilot's statements, once the fighting began, the F-22's thrust vector control actually hindered the Raptor rather than helping it when sparring in close quarters. I'll quote Germany's Major Gruen again. "The key is to get as close as possible to the F-22 and stay there. They didn't expect us to turn so aggressively. As soon as you get to the merge, the Typhoon doesn't necessarily have to fear the F-22. Now, the merge, for clarification's sake, isn't just the name of a great aviation newsletter that you ought to sign up for. That's not a paid plug, I just know they do great work. It's also what fighter pilots call it when two fighters meet head-on in a close quarters pass. Now, thrust vector control does allow a fighter to perform extreme maneuvers, but they come at a high cost. In a dogfight, airspeed is life, and the exotic displays thrust vector control allows all scrub a great deal of it. When the F-22 uses its thrust vectoring nozzles to turn on a dime, the jet is vulnerable until it can regain airspeed. If it doesn't manage to score a kill immediately after performing such a maneuver, the Raptor becomes easy prey until its pair of F-119 PW-100s can get all 70,000 pounds of fighter moving again. Here's how it was explained by an unnamed Eurofighter Typhoon test pilot in The Aviationist. If you are defensive and your aircraft has thrust vectoring, you can possibly outturn your enemy, but that most likely won't prove to be a great idea. An energy fighter like the Typhoon will conveniently use the vertical to retain energy and aggressively reposition for a missile or gunshot. Also, the subsequent acceleration will be extremely time and fuel consuming, giving your opponent the opportunity to tail chase you forever, exploiting all its short-range weapon array. And even on the offensive, using thrust vector control to quickly orient the nose of your fighter towards your enemy just isn't always a good idea either. Because aggressive maneuvers strip the fighter of energy, you may score a kill against the opponent in front of you, but you're left vulnerable to any others nearby. This inherent issue with thrust vectoring combat tactics is really why no other American fighters are equipped with it. In fact, Raptor pilots themselves will tell you that the real benefit of thrust vector control is maintaining a degree of maneuverability while flying at a high angle of attack, when control surfaces just aren't as effective, rather than performing airshow maneuvers in a dogfight. We know for sure that at least some, likely 2 Eurofighters actually scored notional kills against their F-22 opponents in these drills. That story was quickly picked up by news outlets all around the world, eager for a story about how America's expensive Raptor was failing to live up to expectations. But what does losing a dogfight in these sorts of exercises even really mean? Raptor fans will tell you that exercises like these, with their contrived circumstances and intentionally one-sided rules of engagement, may be good for training, but they're a poor measure of a fighter's actual performance in the absence of broader context. The very nature of these exercises set out to put the Raptor at a disadvantage, eliminating all of its greatest strengths, in favor of an old-fashioned shootout the likes of which haven't been seen at scale since the Vietnam War. According to media reports, the F-22, quote, decimated the Typhoon when able to engage from beyond visual range, because it didn't have to fly with one wing tied behind its back. Perhaps most damning of all, Raptor fans will argue that Germany was bragging about securing a few kills against the Raptor, but they never once claimed that the Eurofighter won more sparring matches than the F-22 did. They just said that they won some of them, and that was with a number of distinct advantages handed to them. The fact of the matter is, they'll tell you, the headline-grabbing story wasn't about Eurofighters dominating the F-22, it was about 2 of them managing to score wins at all against an aircraft that many think of as invincible. But then Typhoon fans, on the other hand, will argue that these exercises, like real combat, aren't about being fair. The Eurofighters' ability to stand and scrap with the Raptor in close quarters is proof positive that the Typhoon is capable of competing with the most advanced and expensive fighters on the planet when it comes to close quarters air combat. And that, combined with its improved avionics and beyond visual range capabilities that have manifested since those interactions, make the Eurofighter Typhoon one of the best pound-for-pound fighters anywhere on the planet. But here's the painful truth. Both of these arguments are right. The F-22 Raptor isn't considered the most dominant air superiority fighter today because it can't lose. That's not how combat works. It's not even how any fighting works. No matter how capable, no matter how advanced, no matter how well trained, anyone can find themselves knee-deep in a disadvantage they can't overcome. Eric Wickland, a former operations specialist in the US Navy, made this point pretty eloquently earlier this year. World War II ace Eric Hartmann is the highest scoring ace ever, with 352 kills. That doesn't mean he never lost. He got shot down 16 times. He's still the greatest ace because he won much more often than he lost. The F-22's advanced avionics, high degree of maneuverability, and extreme stealth all make it an incredibly capable platform. But nothing makes a fighter invincible. If you stack the deck against anything, it'll find its limits. And it's important to note that finding those limits of both the pilot and the platform is the real reason these exercises exist. Red Flag isn't about winning internet dogfights. It's about going on to win real ones. Taking home a few W's in a series of staged exercises doesn't mean nothing, but it doesn't mean everything either. The Eurofighter Typhoon is an incredibly capable 4th-generation fighter, but if you were to pit it against a 5th-generation fighter, that stealthy opponent is likely going to win most engagements in a relatively boring but rather sneaky way. But if these stealth jets happen to find themselves within gun's reach of the Eurofighter, the winner won't be as easy to divine. That's an important lesson for both 4th and 5th-generation pilots to take away from these exercises. And that assertion is substantiated in numbers that we can confirm. In its earliest appearances at Red Flag back in 2006 and 2007, F-22s racked up 144 and 241 wins respectively, but lost a handful of jets as well, to lowly 4th-generation fighters like the F-16C. In the F-22's first air-to-air outing, without being limited to within visual range, it took out 8 F-15s without them ever managing to even paint it with a target. But if you can get in close with the F-22 and eliminate its technological advantages, it, like anything else, is just another aircraft in a fight for its life. This time, I'll quote the Air Force's Lieutenant Colonel Wade Tolliver from a statement he made back in 2007. If you see numbers where you never have a loss, I don't think you're training to your full ability. If you don't at some point have a simulated loss, we're not going to push ourselves to be as capable as we are. Can the Eurofighter Typhoon beat the F-22 Raptor in a dogfight? The answer is an unequivocal yes. It's a very capable jet, and under the right set of rare and unusual circumstances, literally just about anything could beat the F-22. In fact, if you were really impressed by those F-22 kill markings on the German Typhoons, you should know that they've been applied to other aircraft after notional victories as well, including at least one A-10 Warthog. But if instead your questions are, could these platforms consistently beat the F-22 in real-life combat? Are F-22 pilots losing any sleep over these outcomes? The answers there are no. People don't call the F-22 Raptor the reigning king of the skies because it literally never loses. Having the F-22 Raptor on your wing in the sky, like Michael Jordan on the basketball court or Chesty Puller on the battlefield, isn't a guarantee of victory. They all have a few L's on their resumes. The fact of the matter is, nobody wins all the time. Not even the mighty Raptor. And on that ends yet another edition of Air Power from Sandbox News. I'm Alex Hollings. Make sure you swing by sandboxnews.com today and every day for all the latest in news, entertainment, and motivation from all around the force. If you got anything out of today's video, make sure to click like and subscribe below, and leave me a few comments so I know what I should cover next. And of course, don't forget to tap on that bell icon so you never miss a drop from Sandbox News.